Hello all and welcome to video classes by Konnur Institutes. Today we will be discussing the next topic, which is cost, right? So this chapter in this chapter it's all about cost and the how the firm or how the producer is going to incur the cost, right? So in this table we have already seen in our previous classes. If you remember or if you go back and check those previous videos, you will find the same graph wherein we have discussed the labor and the capital, right? So labor as an input and another input we have considered as the capital. So these are the two basic inputs which we have kept here as inputs factors in this chapter. So if you remember what we had discussed in the previous class with regards to this table, you can remember as we go on increasing one input, that will always have an impact on the output, right? So that's what we have discussed about this. But now when we are talking about the cost, you can see when we have two different combination of inputs, then we get output also in a different thing. So we say it as a change in the output. How we are getting that change in the output is because we have made a certain combination in the inputs, which we call it as a change in the inputs. For example, you can see here we have got 10 units as an output with the combination of 4 labor and 1 capital, right? So this is 4 labor with 1 capital, right? Again, this 10 units what we have received with the combination of this labor, 4 units of labor and 1 unit of capital, is this constant? Are we getting only 10 units only with this combination of inputs? No, right? Even you can see here also we have received 10 units as output with the combination of 2 labor and 2 units of capital, right? And if we go on looking at the table, we also even have received 10 units as output with the combination of labor 1 and capital 4. Now my question is, how the firm or how the producer is going to choose according from these 3 combinations if he wants to produce Q as 10 units. Okay. Now the question is whether he is going to use 4 labor and 1 capital, or whether is he going to use 2 capital and 2 labor, or whether he is going to use 4 capital with the 1 labor. He has to think, right, which can fetch him more profit for his firm, and when he is fetching more profits, he has to incur the least expenses or the least cost, right? So he will think or he will analyze these 3 combinations, which combination is going to benefit him, which combination of the labor and the capital is going to cost him a least cost. With that least cost, he is going to manufacture these 10 units. So on this basis, he is going to analyze the cost with making the combinations in the inputs. So we have already seen there are so many economists wherein they come and study, they give their definitions, right? So here also when we are talking about the cost, we have already discussed the production function, right? If you remember, we have a production function. So similarly, we even have Cobb Douglas, who is also a famous economist. He has also given the equation for the production combination, which is Q is equal to X of alpha 1 and x raised to beta. What is this q? Q refers to the quantity. If we have already discussed this, right? Q is nothing but the quantity the firm is going to produce the output. And x1 is the factor, or we can say as a one input which we have considered here as a labor, and x2 is another input, we even can call it as a capital, okay? And these alpha and beta are always the factors which are related to this x1 and x2. So x1 is the factor and x2 is the factor. So this is the combination this is the equation which is given by the Cobb-Douglas, okay? And here also we have something, a similar kind of thing which we have discussed in the last class, which is returns to scale. So in this returns to scale we have discussed CRS, right? Constant returns to scale, and IRS, increased return to scale, DRS, and decreasing returns to scale, right? So if you remember what these stands for and what the definition it tells to us, then it will be easy for you all to understand this Cobb-Douglas equation which is being given for the production function. So suppose if you have got this to this factor, okay, this is nothing but wherein the previous inputs have been changed, okay, then these are called as the change in the inputs. So when you have changed these inputs from the previous, then what is the equation you are going to get? This is the original equation. And when you have increased the inputs from x factor 1 alpha to the x factor alpha to the dash, then what is your new equation? So your new equation becomes q raised to 0, and here it becomes alpha, and this becomes the beta, okay? And when you have increased to t times, okay, then what is your new equation? We get q1 is equal to t raised to q0, which is again nothing but defined as the CSR, constant returns to scale. Why we are calling it as constant to return scale is whatever the changes you have made in the inputs, the same amount of output is also what you are getting in the output, okay? So there is constant change in the input, and that change, whatever the change you have made in the input, has impacted the same ratio in the output. So that's the reason we call it as a constant returns to scale. Here in this situation, the alpha plus beta will always equal to 1. And when alpha and beta are less than 1 and alpha and beta are more than 1, you can say this is decreasing returns to scale and this is increasing returns to scale. So which alpha and beta, when both are equal, then we call it as the constant returns to scale. Why this is decreasing return to scale is whatever the input you have changed, okay, the same amount is being, at least there should be a same amount of or the same proportion which needs to be changed in the output, right? But in this situation, you are getting less than the input what you have made changes in the input. So that's the reason we call it as the decreasing returns to scale. And whatever the proportion of the ratio you have changed in the inputs, if you are receiving more than that in the output, then we call it as the increasing returns to scale. So this is how a producer or a firm decides the cost based on the combination of the inputs, whether if it is making a huge profit by incurring the least and the least of the costs. So this is all about that. and in the next class we will study more on there are so many curves which we have already studied, which are regards to the short run cost and the long run cost. So in that short run and long run, you will get again the so many different kinds of curves wherein we will study in the next class. See you all in the next class.